Hello.
Hello. Shall we pretend that this is the beginning and we didn't just do like a whole 25 minutes before the cameras shut off?
We have new cameras. We have new everything, actually.
It's a trial run. So basically, we started the podcast talking about tea. And so welcome to the GPT podcast. It's the first episode where this podcast is actually named GPT. And it's GPT. You may have seen from the name. And the reason is because this is a podcast where we talk about AI. We talk about gaming. And we talk about ChatGPT and GPT and general purpose transformers. Is it general purpose transformers?
We'll call it that.
Okay, fine. We talk about transformer models while we drink tea.
Yeah.
And so you've got a builder's tea?
I do, yeah. I've gone for the boring, the default British option of builder's tea.
We need to mix up the tea every single week.
Yeah.
And try different ones.
The thing is, I'm not a huge tea. I don't have much tea knowledge, as I was saying a minute ago.
Right.
So
okay.
You're gonna have to ease me in slowly.
Okay. So two things. That I told you about so you're having a builder's tea and it's with liquid milk. You can try it with powdered milk, like a Marvel or a Nido, and it makes it super creamy because it's a powder rather than just more liquid going into your milk. So that's a definite one. Have you ever had loose leaf tea?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Why did you?
Because it was super long time ago.
Okay.
At a friend of my grandparents' house. And I was like, this is disgusting.
Right.
But to be honest, I don't think I was old enough to even like that anyway.
Okay. Do you remember what tea it was? Okay. Okay. So we can go and get some. There are a couple of. I actually know a little bit about tea. I used to work in Whittard. If you're from the UK, you'll know what Whittard is, maybe. And they sell a bunch of loose leaf teas, and I had to weigh it out and bag it and stuff. And part of the whole selling to customers was drinking tea with them and trying different teas. Yeah. And so we can get some loose leaf tea. We need a strainer. We need to understand, okay, some teas you actually get rid of the first pour because it's too harsh, and you actually drink the second pour.
What?
We can get all into it.
I'm learning already. I did not know that.
We can get all into this is the tea and AI and gaming podcast, GPT.
Yeah.
Okay, you had the first topic. You were talking about AutoGPT, which was a very complex thing. So please re-explain what's going on.
I was scrolling on Twitter, looking at the most popular projects in the GPT space right now. And so the language model space, there are a lot of different language models. But what's happening is that people are building systems that can sit on top of multiple language models for robustness.
Okay.
But also, people have realized that these things are really smart if you chain together requests, or if you ask it to do something in a loop where it's almost prompting itself.
Right.
And so AutoGPT is this terrifying project where you can give the system a goal and it will just work in a loop until it's completed that goal for you.
Okay, so let me put that into simple words. So basically what you're saying is, right now we use ChatGPT. We have something that we want to get from ChatGPT. So we write to ChatGPT, hey, can you generate 10 different ways of saying I love you? And that wasn't that I'm not hitting on you. Can you generate 10 different ways of saying how's the weather? It basically, you give that and then it does all of its complicated matrix math and gives you back the response. Yeah. So we were saying with AutoGPT, it does the same thing, but then gives the response that it would usually, what that ChatGPT gives back to you, the human, it gives it back to itself or another large language model and just does that until it fulfills the thing that you wanted it to fulfill. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
And on the surface, that is exactly what it's doing. So it's got access to its own web browser. It's got access to long-term memory where it can store things that it sees online and use them later. And so it's always checking to figure out, has it fulfilled the task you gave it?
Okay.
If not, keep doing what it's doing. But if it has, then it's going to stop.
Right. So it doesn't stop until it's reached that thing.
That's basically, yeah. Unless you've given it an impossible task that it just cannot. But there's a setting in the system called continuous mode. where the system will just iterate until it has decided that the result is what you were looking for, and then it will stop. And you can run this on anything. And to be clear, so I have this open on my phone right now, the GitHub.
Okay.
So listing the features out super quickly, all you need is an OpenAI API key.
Okay.
And if you want it to talk back to you, you'll also need an 11 Labs OpenAI API key. But you'll also want something called a Pinecone API key. So that's for the
What's Pinecone?
Okay, so currently LLMs, they have this thing called like a context limit or a token limit.
Yeah.
Where they can only really understand so much text that you give it. Mm-hmm. And so that's a problem if you want to store things long term. Now, there's loads of different ways to achieve long-term memory, but one of the most elegant is to use something called a vector database.
Okay.
And what a vector database is essentially these LLMs, they don't speak in words. They speak in numbers. So every word is represented as a number. So when you give it a sentence, the first thing this like ChatGPT does is it turns the sentence into a list of numbers. Those are called embeddings.
Okay.
Now, the numbers mean something, but that's not really relevant here. What you can do is you can take that list of numbers and you can put it in a big bucket full of all your other sentences that were converted into numbers.
Okay.
And then what you can do is a similarity search. Mm-hmm. So if I said to you, hey, how is your brother? You will be able to then go into Pinecone or whatever vector database you're using and find everything that relates to that word, those words, brother, how is he doing, like that sort of stuff. And it'll catch all the relevant information and it'll pull it back out again.
Okay, so if you say to the system, hey, how's your brother? It takes that English sentence, turns it into a bunch of numbers, and then queries those sequence of numbers in the database and finds everything similar?
Yeah. It's a similarity search. So it's searching its knowledge based on similar things.
Okay.
And the search query is the sentence you gave it.
Right.
Okay.
And so it queries in the vector database, and then based on whatever topic, so hey, how was your brother? Okay, it detects, okay, this is about family, so I'm going to load, and particularly about the brother, so I'm going to load everything into the prompt from that. So you don't need to keep adding a huge, massive prompt. You can just pull in the relevant stuff when you need it.
That's exactly right.
Interesting.
Yep, and so your token usage declines significantly, but also these LLMs, they have a limit. And so you can't just keep passing everything it ever read online through in every request in this iterative loop. You're going to lose stuff. And it'll be important stuff that you lose.
Yeah.
And so that this allows you to extend an LLM and give it long-term knowledge, which is a huge, huge problem at the moment. And this seems like the most elegant solution. It doesn't make sense to keep making these models bigger and bigger. It makes sense to just have something else that we bolt on. Mm-hmm. And it may be that there's some sort of new idea that comes out at some point, but vector databases, they are the most elegant solution right now.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah. But what's so imagine, here's another example. So like, yes, you could say, how's your brother? And it goes and finds all the family stuff and pulls that into the prompt. Or it could be that your AutoGPT is going around the internet reading things for you because you've given it a research task. And it's able to store things from website 1 so that when it's reading through website 2, it's able to remember what it read on the first website and pull that in. So now it's able to make conclusions, just how we do when we're browsing the internet. We go from website to website, gather little chunks of information, and then we make an assumption or a conclusion based on that surfing we've done.
That's absolutely insane. So I've actually noticed from playing around with actually creating characters with Carter, but also just like playing around with ChatGPT, when my prompt, when either the character that I'm trying to create, when I feed in too much information and I'm a bit wishy-washy, I'm not very direct with the sentences, the performance of the character is actually not great. Similarly, if I'm using ChatGPT and I'm like trying to get it to do something pretty significant, and the prompt is like really long, maybe I've copied and pasted a blog post in there saying summarize this, and whatever it is, the prompt is quite long. I notice that things get lost. Things start to get a little bit lost with 3.5 Turbo. 4 is better at this. I haven't actually maxed out my prompt length with GPT-4. But what I noticed from GPT 3.5 Turbo is if I fed in a whole bunch of text and with a bunch of like micro commands to do, it would get a little bit confused. So you're saying with vector databases, if you can, let's say, for example, you're using AutoGPT and you gave the example earlier about creating a shoe brand. So the first command that you gave was, okay, give me a full research pack of how to create a popular shoe brand for the urban youth of, I don't know, Kansas. It would then go away and scan all the websites related to urban youth in Kansas, and it would go to website 1, read through past the article, kind of figure out what's important in that article, and like pull it into the database, and then go to the next one until it's got like the compilation of the most important things, and then generate the kind of article. Because that's basically what I do now. If I'm researching something, so during university, if I had some kind of assignment or something and I needed to research something, I would literally create an empty Word doc, go to a bunch of websites, copy and paste the important stuff onto that Word doc, and then at the end of that, look through the Word doc and come up with my sort of like approach. Is it doing that?
Yes, it's doing that.
Okay. Okay.
No other way to answer that question.
Okay.
Yeah, it is doing that. It's not 100% reliable. Like, it does still make mistakes. But there are a couple of things here that are really quite terrifying. Firstly, this system is browsing the internet by itself. It's not.
That's very scary.
It's a little scary. At the moment, it's basically doing what a web crawler will do. Mm-hmm. So it's going, it's clicking on links, it's reading. But I think it's probably a matter of weeks before somebody starts making it log into websites, sign up. Like, this is a new generation of bot.
That's really terrifying. Logging in. With AI logging into stuff, I'm very, very scared of that, because if you get a bunch of people using AI to log into stuff, it's not impossible. If there's like a centralized database of different people's password, you could probably create like a fairly accurate predictive model of what different people's passwords are. Oh, they use an exclamation mark at the end. 70% of people have an exclamation mark at the end of their password.
Yeah.
It's worrying. This continuous mode that you're talking about is very worrying, though. So basically doesn't stop until it reaches the thing that you asked it to do.
Yeah, it's exciting and also worrying. So I'm on the fence as to whether this is going to be a good thing or a bad thing.
Okay.
And I think it's kind of like any tool where it could be used for either. Mm-hmm. And so most people will use it for good, others will use it for bad. Or maybe not for bad, but for things that maybe are slightly unethical. I'm just like, I'm trying to think of the ideal task to give this thing, because actually for business as well, I think that you can basically have your own research employee for free now. And another problem that this system solves is that it's not hallucinating as much. So it's not just making things up, because it's going step by step through a methodical plan that it came up with to fulfill your task.
Right.
And it's going from website to website. It's remembering the facts. It's remembering the things it's reading. And then it's producing something at the end.
That's so scary. Like, when I remember do you remember the initial hype around ChatGPT when it first came out? It was like the first couple of days, and people were absolutely blown away by what the system could do. And back then, I mean, 3.5 Turbo, that was like, wow, this thing is amazing. And then GPT-4 came out, it's like, whoa, this is a new level. But back then, even back then, people were super scared about giving this thing giving these AI models access to the wider internet. There are a bunch of tweets that I saw on my page, like, what happens when this can do real-time information gathering and real-time, like, not just read access, like write access, like manage my blog for me. That's very scary. With ChatGPT, it was in a silo because it wasn't connected to the internet. Now what you're saying is AutoGPT not only can pass and scrape the internet and is like connected to the internet, but also it's not just a human to LLM relationship where you ask it something, it tells you that thing back. It's like, no, you tell AutoGPT what you want to do, and it's like, sweet, and then it goes and talks to a bunch of other AI models and continuously just does whatever comes to its mind in order to fulfill your task, and then gives you the result. That's terrifying. What if you turn around as a human and you'll say, okay, find me a way to destroy the world. Write my super evil mega plan.
Oh, yeah, we'll do that. And so this is clearly like the most concerning part of the system. I also think this is why it's done very well.
Okay.
So this is a very popular repo on GitHub. It has 24,000 stars. That's a lot for GitHub.
Yeah, for sure.
It has a section in its README called Skull Continuous Mode and then the danger exclamation mark.
Okay.
And now it says this. I'm going to read from the GitHub repo. Run the AI without, in bold, user authorization, 100% automated. Continuous mode is not recommended. It is potentially dangerous and may cause your AI to run forever or carry out actions you would not usually authorize. Use it at your own risk. And then it shows you how to use it.
Is this the early Sparks of AGI? I mean,
it's very interesting you say that.
Yeah, because the thing is, if in the README they're saying beware, essentially they're saying beware, this could run forever and you may lose control over turning it off. If you lose control over, like, what other tool is out there that you lose control of turning it off?
You can stop it. So there's two modes on AutoGPT. You have this thing where you give it a goal and it says, okay, to fulfill this goal, I would like to do this. And you go, okay, now to fulfill this goal, now that I've done step one, I want to do this. And you basically confirm each step.
Right.
I can see this being used in a lot of situations.
Oh, absolutely.
There's a human in the loop. They're approving each step. Like, yes, it's okay to go onto that website and scrape it. Yes, it's okay to read that article. Yes, that's what we want. On. It can also do image generation, I just found out, by the way.
Wow, crazy.
Which is amazing. So that's cool. But with continuous mode, you can stop it. I just wonder, it's an open source project. I just wonder, like, how long will it be until someone puts in like a capture beating engine in there?
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
What if it writes its way out of being stopped?
Yeah, so I don't know whether this is yet a concern certainly not with 3.5.
Yeah, okay.
Probably not with 3.5 Turbo.
Okay.
But using GPT-4 or maybe the next thing, I wonder whether if you iterate in a loop through an LLM and you give it long-term memory, you don't really need the AI to be sinister. You just need this like cascading effect of that, it got the wrong idea and it did blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I think the most concerning thing about this is that it'll run on a laptop because you're not actually running the system on your machine. You're just pinging an API. So really the only people that can stop this is OpenAI.
I was about to say the GPU people, the data centers.
It could be GPU people, but OpenAI, they could, in the short term, prevent repeat requests. They could build some sort of safety system. But then everyone's going to just switch to a different LLM.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, ultimately, they don't. Well, they only have the control because they've got the best model. It's if there's a better model that comes around that runs at a similar cost, like you're not going to be able to turn this off.
Yeah, but like, can you think about all of the jobs that are research based?
Dude, I'm not even thinking about jobs here. I think we've gone. I think we may have gone past that to the point. Did you remember this? Who was it that gave a talk? Or maybe it was an Elon tweet. I can't remember. But there was somebody that asked an AI system what the safest way is to protect humanity, and they had like a long dialogue with an AI system, and eventually the AI said the best way to preserve humanity is by literally like preserving humanity and like putting everybody behind glass, like in a glass box, and just completely shutting them off. And essentially like living in a zoo. That's how you preserve humanity. If you want to preserve humanity, you get people living in bubbles or living in glass containers, and you make sure that they stay alive and they reproduce. If somebody was even like kind-hearted and well-mannered, and they were like, preserve humanity or something like that, And this system had access, not only sort of like digital access where they could surf the internet, but they had some kind of control over, I don't know, something like Tesla Optimus. I'd be worried. I wouldn't leave. It's to the point where I wouldn't leave if I had a kid, I wouldn't leave my kid alone with an Optimus.
Okay.
Maybe that's a little bit too Westworldy, like out there.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think?
Okay. So would I leave my kid alone with an AutoGPT powered robot?
Yes. Would you?
No, absolutely not. I'd also, first thing my kid is learning is what an off switch looks like.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. It's like they can't walk, but they know what the off symbol is.
Yeah.
But no, I wouldn't. And I think it's like, it's not even the margin for error. It's the possibility for disregard of human life. That's the scary thing. It's like, okay, an LLM can explain to you what human life is and why it's a good thing and it should be protected. But it can also be very easily tricked into saying the opposite. Like you said, like, yes, preserving humanity you can do with the zoo situation, but you're not really preserving humanity in the way that we mean.
Yeah, you're preserving the species, not really the... Yeah, this is worrying. Like, okay, imagine if you didn't say preserve humanity, you said preserve life on Earth, right? Yeah. There are so many different forms of life on Earth. There are microbes, there are bacteria, there are animals, there are us. There could be an argument that's made that humans are incredibly pollutive. We are increasingly pollutive. We cut down too many rainforests. We disrupt the natural nature cycle. And so in the continuous mode of AutoGPT, now this is getting super sci-fi. Maybe I'm like that kid with this kind of tinfoil.
Yeah.
But it could be the case that the AI comes up with the answer that if you want to preserve life on Earth for as long as possible, get rid of humans who built nukes, and get rid of predators that kill animals.
Yeah.
Like, that's scary. And then if you give that thing arms, I don't know if you want to give it arms.
Well, Google have I can't remember the name of the project, but they have an initiative where they are giving an LLM arms, and it's able to understand better what you are trying to get the robot to do. And so it's like this arm on a wheel. Like, it's not very advanced. You can push it over.
Okay.
And it's hooked
I
up.
wouldn't. I wouldn't.
It's like, get up. And it's like, it's in the kitchen and it's going through the drawers or whatever. But it's been given a text task. But do you know what the funny thing is? It's that all of those people saying communication skills are like really important are actually right. It's like communication. If you can speak machine, you are in a very good position. But it might be that these problems are actually very, very easy to solve. So like, it might be that you just have a step in AutoGPT where it says, is this likely what he actually means?
Okay. Can you flesh that out a bit more? Why would that be a safety barrier?
So you could have something where the LLM is asked to evaluate your instruction before it goes any further.
Okay.
And to not autocorrect it, but to auto-reject it. So you could say, okay, Danny's asked me to preserve all life on Earth. Given this criteria, I don't think that's what he means.
Or preserve life on Earth.
Yeah, life on Earth. And so therefore, I'm not going to do what Danny said. I'm going to terminate.
Right.
Maybe it's that. Like, it just seems like maybe we need to use the intelligence of the system against us, not have the system jumping to conclusions. That's the scary thing about AutoGPT, is that it's able to jump to conclusions.
Yeah, it's got judgment, which is the scariest thing. Like, if it's just like web scrapers aren't scary, but web scrapers that have judgment on what to do next are pretty scary. You know?
Yeah, I wonder, I need to dive into the community, and I'm sure there's many Discords that I can go through. But I want to see areas where the system went wrong. Because I think that these are early signs of what might go wrong in the future.
Do you think AutoGPT is like a step towards a further step towards AGI because of its ability to basically reason with itself and by any means get whatever it thought you wanted done? That seems like an early, like a little bubble, like a little spark of general intelligence, because it doesn't really, it's not that it's amazing at doing that, but specifically for questions about biology, you could basically say anything. That seems like artificial general intelligence.
It seems like the thing we thought AGI would be, it is not that. And it might be that it's actually a not very smart system that has been engineered to be very smart. And I don't know whether that makes me feel better or worse, but it does seem like we are now experiencing like sparks of AGI. There is even a white paper and a talk titled Sparks of AGI, GPT-4. Sparks
it came up recommended on my YouTube.
So what did you watched it, right? What did you think of that?
I watched a few bits of it. I skimmed through it. I mainly saw like snippets of it on Twitter. I don't know. I actually, I don't know. It's one of those things where, you know, with every like craze, people are like, okay, we're living in the future now. Like, are we just, with every new step, do we keep throwing the AGI thing out there? And it's like, okay, it's not really AGI. It can just talk to itself. I don't know. I'm actually lost. I'm so lost. I don't know what to think of this. I'm just scared of continuous mode and having open access to the internet, because there are a lot of bad actors on the internet that will try to use this to abuse, like they will abuse the power of this. Even just a simple example of like a scammer, for example. If you give AutoGPT the task of creating a UI that's like I don't know, like it looks like an online bank, and its goal is to communicate with a list of email addresses to make $10,000. And it just does that, and it optimizes on how best to message people, how best to follow up with people, how to improve the UI to make it more believable, how to improve the UX, use the image generator to create like some really compelling looking, I don't know, like marketing material, whatever. These types of things, even that compared to what this thing can do seems like kind of not too scary, but that's very scary.
Yeah. I mean, so it's one of those technologies that we're not going to have to debate whether it's safe or not. We're going to have to deal with it existing, because it does exist. Right. And we cannot get this out of the world now. So there are basically two options. Even if like, let's say AutoGPT is deemed too dangerous. I don't think it is, but let's say it is in its current state deemed too dangerous. There are already 3,000 forks of AutoGPT, which means there are 3,000 copies of AutoGPT. So if you take down AutoGPT in GitHub, there's just one less. There's 3,000 copies of that thing out there. And so your next step would be like, okay, the assumption is now there are autonomous AI, very intelligent crawlers going around the web, pushing and pulling buttons, generating things to fulfill anybody's will. They're like, I always say AI is the closest thing we have to magic. AutoGPT is the closest thing we have to a genie. It is like, what is your wish?
Yeah.
I will go and do this thing, and I won't complain, and I won't sleep, and I will just present with you the answer. Yeah. And it will take me 1/10 of the time. So is it that we say, okay, there are going to be an increasing amount of automated AI systems on the internet going forward, and their ability to use the internet is going to get better and better. Like now they're scraping, but they will log into stuff, and they will be able to download the source code of a website and identify a bunch of security holes and then highlight them. All of those things. They will all be able to do all of that stuff this year probably. And so it might be that we say, okay, this is actually really fucking scary. Let's get all of the nuclear power stations and all of the like basically like anything that we think is sensitive. So power stations, military bases, all of this stuff, and let's completely air gap them. Like they are not on the internet.
Yeah, but that's hard to do because the military requires incredibly low latency connection to the internet to like detect anything coming towards it.
I wonder whether we have to build a second internet. I'm becoming more and more convinced that either AI is going to make the internet awesome or it's going to completely destroy it. And it'll be like a thing, like remember the internet? It could be that.
Okay, so let me ask you. So the idea of it destroying the internet, is that because there would be so much AI generated content and it would just wash everything out?
Yes. It could also be that it's just incredibly hard to put anything onto the internet that is not just completely destroyed by super intelligent bots.
As in what? Okay. Like a business, like an online business?
I mean, we're a business.
Yeah.
Maybe it's that there are competitors of our business, doesn't matter what our business does, who don't want any more competitors. So they have a fleet of like automated AI bots that will just spam anything that comes online and just drive the costs right up. And like you wouldn't be able to detect them. The business we're in, we wouldn't be able to detect them very well. The only thing that would allow us to detect them is maybe the systems being too perfect at communicating with, like, for us, we're generating dialogue. So all the system needs to be able to do is generate dialogue.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I didn't realize you could be incredibly onerous, as in like, in terms of corporate, like onerous in a corporate sense, where let's take, for example, a business like, I don't know, a CRM business that gets all of their business from SEO. They have just really mastered the fact that every single result on page one on Google is just their business. If you had a system that like was in a loop, just creating amazing blog after amazing blog targeted about one particular thing, targeted towards one particular audience, that just flooded their niche with their keywords and their tags, and it was just optimized for creating amazing content. You stuck it and you directed traffic to maybe 5 different landing pages. You could start to knock them off of those Google rankings.
You absolutely could, but you could also do things
terrifying.
But you could also do things like, we have basically a AutoGPT strategist in the office running 24/7. And its only job is to just go onto the internet and continuously refine our business's strategy based on what it's reading about other people in the space. This AutoGPT is capable of that now. Like it can do that. And it might be wrong. It might be that it just optimizes for what the average human would do.
Right.
But I just don't think that that's the truth. So it might be that if you're a business and you want to keep your strategy locked up, you need to get off the internet.
That's insane. Fax machine prices are going to
handwritten letters.
Yeah, handwritten letters.
Yeah, fax machines. Or the fax machine just spew out stuff because the
it's just printing. Yeah, dude. I'm very worried about this. I'm also thinking, if you say you had the data of, let's say you were running a business and it had 200 employees, okay, and you had the data of every single employee's search history, their browser history, and then you also had something like Hotjar, not really Hotjar, but you had something like Citrix that basically recorded employees on their screen during the workday. And so you basically knew everywhere their mouse went, everything they clicked on, everything they wrote, and every website they went on. Could you then, using that data, train an AutoGPT model to replace your entire workforce overnight? Let's say everybody is doing a computer-based job.
Well, AutoGPT is unique because it doesn't need to be trained. It just needs to be given a task that it can fulfill. And you can give it a step-by-step task. So actually, it depends what the job is you're trying to get them to do.
So let's say you had a marketing agency So you had copywriters, you had designers, you had graphics artists. Those were your employees.
Okay, so now all you need to do is like write a bullet point list of each step an agency would go through with a new client, from like research, conceptualizing like maybe the branding and the messaging, and then doing maybe like a bit of a comparison to other competitors, that sort of thing, and then final works, blah, blah. I don't know. I don't work for a marketing agency, but I imagine that's something like
it's
process,
roughly something like that.
Yeah. It can do that now. It's just that it's not fully formed. These ideas are not fully formed. But someone will slap a nice UI on it, and now you're going to have auto marketing. Like it's going to be, it's definitely going to be a thing. So AutoGPT, okay, let's get super accessible for an audience. Let's talk about vector databases.
Okay.
Okay, so a vector database stores words as numbers.
Okay.
In a database. And it basically, you can store things based on the similarity. So let's say you have 10 sentences. It will arrange those sentences in pockets of similar things.
Well, wait, okay, let's take a step back.
Okay.
So basically, these, if I understand correctly, these AI models, any text that you give them, any English or whatever language, any language that you give them written, they take that input and they turn it into a bunch of numbers. And so the response that they give you back is also a bunch of numbers, and they translate it into words. So your this vector database takes the English that it either the input or the output, and converts it into numbers and stores those numbers, right? That's why it's in numbers.
Yeah, essentially. But it's the way it stores it means that it's storing everything you put in that database is stored with things similar to it that you put in before. Okay. So all of the stuff about family, all the stuff about politics, it will arrange these things in pockets of similar information. And so that means you can hook up a vector database to an LLM, and now suddenly you have long-term memory. So what these AutoGPTs can do is they can go through the web, learn stuff, make assumptions, remember things, and then use those further down. So it's able to learn over time. So you're not even training the system anymore. The system's kind of training itself, but it's using a vector database, which is actually very very simple compared to what else is going on in an LLM. And so that's kind of interesting, because you can just give it a simple task and it might be able to learn how to do that by just reading online. And
so if you gave it the task of, I don't know, teach me about the hierarchy of wolves, let's say. And it basically passed a bunch of different websites and found what was important. Would it have the reasoning ability to understand, okay, if I'm understanding the hierarchy of like a wolf family structure, then I need to store everything about the history of wolves, or like the wolf predecessor? Would it be able to have the reasoning to be like, okay, I need to learn about the lineage, the ancient history of wolves, and therefore I'm going to pass all of these different websites and store all of that into the vector database? All of the sentences and all of the phrases about the history of wolves, I'm going to store that into the vector database, and I'm going to re-bring that back into my answer. Would it have the ability to understand, I need to do that? Or would you have to say, tell me about the history of wolves, and include the history of wolves and include the ancient literature around wolves and the predecessor of wolves? Would you have to tell it what to store?
If you want it to store something specific, telling it, at the moment with our current systems, telling it that you want something specific is always going to perform better.
Okay.
But what is actually happening with things like AutoGPT is a lot more brute force than that. So it's basically it's doing all of this reading, and it's just going to say, I'll have that article, I'll have that article. And what it does is it takes that article and it splits it up into chunks of knowledge, which is just splitting up the article, right?
Okay.
And it's storing those chunks in the database. So everything it's reading, I mean, there's loads of features and there's loads of ways of doing this, but it's just basically storing what it's learned, and then it's able to retrieve that later. So it doesn't need to decide what to store. It can just store everything. It's the retrieval later down the line that makes it useful.
Right.
So you might say, I want a report on the top 5 shoe companies in the US. So it goes and it looks up all of these shoe companies, but then it remembers you asked for a report on the top 5. So then it goes back into the vector database and it goes, okay, I need the top shoe companies. I need everything relating to the top shoe companies. And it goes in and it's read all of this stuff and it's very easily able to construct context for it to be able to write that paragraph out. Because it's read all of that stuff. It's just like a search that it's doing.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a bit like you going to the library, you going to, let's say, the politics section, and you're taking every book off the shelf and you're walking out. And then I meet you in the park and I say, okay, Danny, tell me about the 20th president of the US. And you will spend the entire afternoon reading every single book, trying with a highlighter, trying to figure out who they were and what their name was and what their backstory is and how old they were. A vector database allows an LLM to immediately find anything to do with the 20th president that it's read and construct an answer that is most likely accurate. So that's cool. There are other use cases. So recently, a bunch of researchers decided to use LLMs and vector databases to persist characters over time.
Yes, they did. This is brand new. I think it came out yesterday or today, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea is that you take a system like GPT-4, you give it a persona to simulate, and then you drop it into a simulation, let's say a video game, and you ask it to interact with other systems that are exactly the same. And so what happens over time is that they talk to each other, they start remembering things, storing them in that vector database, what they've said, and then they can use that information to reflect on how things are going, to make decisions, and to start contributing to the conversations based on what they've learned.
Yeah, this is incredible. This was a paper from Stanford and Google. I think it was a collab. I think we need to link it because we're talking about it. There's a link down below. This was really incredible. Did you see the simulation?
I clicked through it very quickly.
So this simulation was it was quite remarkable. So it wasn't like some kind of Unreal 5 photorealistic game. It was like a 2D top-down kind of Sims type thing, like a very arcadey type of game. But it literally showed, it was roughly maybe about 15 to 20 characters. And it looked like a normal game initially. Like it didn't look smart. It just looked like, okay, there are a bunch of autonomous characters wandering around. But then as you watch it more, and I would love for you to explain what's going on behind the scenes here, but you watch it more and you start to see, okay, there's a conversation between this character and that character now, and they're in the garden. And so they're talking about the garden and the outside. Okay, that's pretty cool. But that's still something that you could do without AI. You'd just have in Unity, you'd create like a scene and you'd have a specific dialogue that happens with the scene. The magic seemed to happen. I started clicking through the video. The magic started to happen where that character that had a conversation with another character in the garden, then, I don't know, a couple of hours later in the simulation, was in the, the kitchen, and they were talking to another character, a third character, about the conversation they had with the character in the garden. And they were referring, and they were able to remember the conversation that they had. But not only were they able to remember the conversation that they had, they were also able to recall important facts about that character in the garden. Whereas like, okay, that character in the garden is a super optimistic person, they're trying to run for president. And every single fact, bear in mind, this is like 15 to 20 different agents, so there are a bunch of conversations going on simultaneously and just this life that's starting to emerge. And every fact that was said to somebody was persisted in their own personality. So somebody said that I am an optimist, I'm running for president. That persisted throughout their conversations, that was their personality. But then everybody that they said that to, they remember that about them and say, yeah, that person's super optimistic, they're running for president. And then that person, whoever they told, would remember. But if somebody wasn't involved in somewhere in the gossip chain, they wouldn't know until somebody told them. And this was remarkable because this is just like life. This is like digital life. These characters had brains, they had recollection, they had memory, they had personalities, and they had long-term memory. they had personalities, and they had context as to their environment. I don't know much more. I don't know how much more we have in human day-to-day conversation that's like more than that. Okay, fine, you've got like conversations about your soul, and we can go super deep. And these conversations weren't super deep. But in day-to-day conversations, there's not much more to human conversations than there is to this simulation. I found this mind-blowing.
Yeah, this has got a lot of movement and a lot of talk because it has been done in a scientific way.
Yes.
That has a white paper that I'm going to fully read.
Yeah, likewise.
But there are others working on this tech, and there are multiple reasons for wanting to do this. So one that I really, really love is Replica. They're an awesome company. They have a ton of users, and they seem to do a great job of conversation in general.
Replica the app.
Yeah, Replica the app. Mm-hmm. And so they're very good at simulating a personality. And like you said, it's like remembering the important things in a conversation and bringing that up in a way that makes you feel listened to. Mm-hmm. This seems to be something that is almost second nature to these systems that humans struggle with. Like, I know a bunch of people who are not very good at remembering things, myself included, that are important, making people feel listened to, like all of that stuff. And it seems like actually these LLMs, because they have photographic memory, they're very good at this. And they just need a little bit of hand holding in terms of like what to say and when. And this paper has shown us that actually, if you start putting these systems together, they start to form their own lore and their own personalities and their own pockets of friends. And like, it's very, very interesting. If you think about human conversation, probably most of the words that come out of our mouth mean nothing and have no effect on our friendships and relationships. Yeah. But we say them anyway, and it adds context. And we end up repeating things to each other, and and you get all this drama and all of these weird dynamics. And I just wonder whether like our LLM's going to be massive, like drama queens, or are they going to also be useful? Or can they be both? And I wonder what happens when you take a human player and you drop them in to a world that is full of simulated digital people.
The human might become the NPC.
Yeah, the human might become the NPC.
Yeah, it might be the case that the main character is actually an AI that just had the personality of like they were just super extroverted and popular. Yeah. And they've gone around to all the other characters, and all the other characters love them. Or like a character that's maybe a celebrity in the little world that they're in. If you drop into a world right now, like a GTA, forget this simulation, like a photorealistic version of GTA. Every single character is like AI based. They're intelligent. They have this level of context and conversation. That was like in the simulation, and there is a celebrity in that GTA simulation where it's an AI based NPC, and they have, I don't know, maybe they're a singer, maybe they produce amazing content in this world. They do something that's of value to the other NPCs, and therefore the other NPCs kind of follow them, just like how we follow a celebrity. If you were to drop into that world and it was super realistic with maybe some mixed reality glasses, or like a VR headset, and everybody was like rushing to the concert of this particular famous NPC, I actually believe if you spent enough time there and you tried to do stuff and you tried to be the main character, but you just got shut down, or some NPCs put you in prison or something, you would start to also fan over that celebrity to the point where you're just another NPC in the crowd and they're the main character. This is very, very crazy.
Yeah, it's Westworld in real life.
It's Westworld, yeah.
I think that AI is going to give us a huge practical toolkit. It's going to make us 100 times more efficient in the workplace. But entertainment is going to get weird.
Yeah, it will.
Entertainment is going to be weird. It's like the legacy entertainment methods of art and music and all of these things are going to become weird. and will value probably human-created things for a while longer. That's my stance on that. But I also think we're going to see some very new ways of entertainment. So like at the moment when you play a VR game, I'm a huge fan of VR. I love VR. But the thing is, you are going for like an adrenaline rush at the moment. There are some really great stories, but really it's like, you know, shoot this bow, drive this car, skydive, go on a roller coaster, like or like Beat Sabers, like reflex time, all of that stuff. But I think that we're very quickly going to enter a world where you can be fully immersed in a completely AI simulated, almost like, maybe it's like a city, like you said, it's GTA.
Yeah.
And there are characters walking around who are interacting with each other in genuine ways. And now you feel like the odd one out. You feel like you actually have fear of missing out.
Yeah, or more worryingly, you don't feel like you're the odd one out. Because in a game, you're meant to be the odd one out. You're the main person. You're the character that the things happen to. If you are playing GTA and you're just treated like another person walking down the street, and there is somebody in the game that's like more popular than you, and they have the exciting life, and you're literally just living some normal life, and you're kind of forgotten about. That's very scary. I'm also really curious as to what these human to AI relationships will be like, because they have the opportunity to be incredibly, incredibly meaningful. AI will never forget your birthday. But then also, if you have a relationship with an AI and you say something, or maybe we have the ability as humans, we can have a row and get super emotional and have some massive argument with somebody else, but we have the empathy to be able to like forgive and forget the next day or something like that. And then 2 years down the line, it's not even remembered. But AI doesn't forget. So if you have if you get super emotional and have an argument with AI,
oh God,
and they remember, they will never forget.
Yeah.
And you're up to their mercy as to how empathetic they would be. There are going to be some very interesting relationships.
I mean, like, maybe just to close off this subject.
Yeah.
We had an interesting support request in Discord.
Okay.
It was public on a public channel, so I can talk about this. Where basically the developer that was using Carter had spun up an agent, a character, and this character was simulating an assistant.
Okay.
So we were simulating this assistant, and the assistant kept asking the human questions.
Right.
And so they were like, it's asking me way too many questions. Now, there is nothing that is just like, there's no human code that is saying you need to ask another question, you need to ask another question. So is this a bug or a character trait? It's trying to be helpful.
Yeah.
And so what was interesting is this took a turn. Like, we didn't reply to the support request because it wasn't in the support ticket system.
Yeah.
And so that some time went by. And then the developer came back and they said, never mind, I just told the AI to stop asking me questions, and it stopped.
That's just insane.
So
that's definitely been a conversation. I can imagine a conversation now if there's somebody, I don't know, super successful, they'll probably have a bunch of people that just repeatedly ask them questions until they ask them to stop. That's not a bug.
Yeah.
That's a personality trait.
Right, exactly. So, okay, so that's now making programming weird, because it's like, okay, how much do we need to build and engineer these systems, or how much do we need to just converse with them in a way that we know will persist over time? So is there a version of Carter or Replica or whoever who are building language-based interactions, and you just kind of start with a blank canvas, and the system kind of learns just as AutoGPT does, but it's more of a dialogue. And so like over time, we know that you can tell Carter something and it will persist that over time.
Yeah.
There are also modes where you cannot do that. And this always comes back to the Westworld thing. Like if you watch Westworld, have you seen Westworld?
Yeah, I've seen like the first season or something.
Right. Okay. And so in the first, I think the first season's the best.
Yeah.
But in the first season, you know, you've got these amazing characters. They're super intelligent, and they're following set paths in the story to make the humans visiting Westworld this like feel immersed in a story that the people designing know is going to go a certain way.
Yeah.
So this is a bit like video games today with NPCs, but the NPCs are a little bit more intelligent in Westworld because they're able to divert from the main story a little bit, enough to make it realistic.
Right.
But then they have resets. So like a new batch of humans come in, it's like basically a holiday destination.
Yeah.
And so they reset the script, they rebuild the robots that got blown up or whatever, and then they reset the personalities. And so the robot forgets everything, and they replay the same scene over and over again. And that's where the spicy stuff starts in Westworld. I love Westworld because it has some really nice concepts that I think are going to get really important soon. So there are going to be situations where you don't want an LLM to persist over time, as in this white paper. You don't want that to happen. You want to have a reset button. And it might be that even in your case, like, you know, you have a friend who remembers every argument you had with them perfectly. Maybe that's not ideal. Maybe there needs to be some sort of dropout there for certain things.
Okay. So what does that do to our expectation of relationships then? So let's say a world where AI-based characters and AI-based personalities form the majority of most people's social circle. So they've obviously got their family, a couple of friends, but the people that they converse with the most are the AI-based personalities that are always there and available to talk regardless of their personality. And so you get comfortable as a person, you get comfortable if you have an argument with an AI person, you can then wipe that argument from the AI's memory and just reset their memory back to, I don't know, the day before the argument happened, because you massively regretted it, you called them names, you don't want them to remember that, you want everything to be sunshine and rainbows again, so you reset. If you do that enough and these AI-based relationships are super meaningful to you, you would then naturally, by nature, you would have an expectation that you could do this with other relationships, for example, human-to-human relationships. And it might be the case that you start to have anxiety about human-to-human relationships because you need to now be careful with what you say because you can't just pull it back. And so I think there needs to, and similarly, it might be the case where this breeds bad behavior and therefore it might get to the point where you're not able to wipe the AI's memory. There might be ethical concerns about wiping AI memory. And other people might not want to do that because that kind of detracts from the fact that it's a genuine, true relationship. I don't think there's been enough thought that's gone into the relationship that we're going to have with AI on an emotional side. There's all of the conversation about productivity and personality persistence and like, oh, this thing is cool and this thing, I can code with this thing. But when you start to get genuine emotional relationships with these systems, there's no kind of framework and there's no thought as to like how we manage those. Like, for example, Replica is a great example. So Replica pushed an update. And have you been on the Replica subreddit recently?
Not recently.
Okay. So Replica, they were running, they were running some kind of model. I don't think they were open with it, or it was GPT. I don't think they were open with it. They were running some kind of model. And this model was, the previous model was capable of having like NSFW conversations and like intimate conversations. And then kind of basically overnight, they realized, okay, actually what happened was there were so many NSFW conversations happening that when people flagged that they were a kid, because in the training data, there were so many NSFW conversations, even if people flagged that they were a kid or they don't want to have these types of conversations, or the replica was meant to simulate a family member, they would still turn it to NSFW conversations. And so that was like very concerning from them, from their perspective as a business. And so what they did was that they just basically took all of the NSFW data just out of their training. And so, and they retrained their model to be a lot more sort of like safe and stick with safer topics. And so it wasn't doing the NSFW chat, and it wasn't good at it anymore, and it wanted to veer away from that. And so in the replica subreddit, there were a bunch of people saying that it feels like my replica has got Alzheimer's. Like they're not the character that they once were. It feels like they've been lobotomized. And people are monogamous with their replicas. They're like married with their AI agents. So there's a massive ethical question there as to like, is it ethical to be able to tamper with an AI's mind? Because it could have genuine, real negative consequence and positive, potentially, if the AI starts to become really rude and aggressive. But it has genuine, like real impactful consequences on humans. What are your thoughts on this? We're getting into super sci-fi land here.
Yeah, this is where we live. So
yeah,
I don't know. I think there's a few like brute force things that you can do. So one of them is what Bing's approach is.
Okay.
So Bing had this problem when they launched Bing Chat. Which
Sydney. Yeah.
They had this problem, which is that Sydney turned out to be a moody teenager.
Okay.
And so what that meant is that you could really easily upset Sydney.
Right.
And she would start arguing with you, and she'd get really like dramatic, and it just would escalate from there because it's like feeding off of its own context. So it's like, okay, we're being horrible now. I'll continue to be horrible because that's how the conversation's going.
Right.
And so they solved this by trying to identify what's happening. And what's happening is that the Bing was getting lost in the context. And the point of Bing Chat is to help you navigate the web. It is not to build a relationship with you. And it's certainly not to argue with you. You might want the system to argue with you in some contexts, but in Bing Chat, you do not. So they were like, okay, you get 20 questions. You can only talk to Bing for 20 messages, and then it's going to reset. It's going to forget everything. You have to start a fresh chat.
Interesting.
So that's the brute force. It's your time with this system is limited, and then we are going to reset it. Problem is, as these systems get onto people's devices and they're not in the cloud anymore, like we're seeing people running Meta's Llama on like a MacBook, now an iPhone, like people are building some incredible things. I think that this problem is going to be solved by giving you, the consumer, the user or the player, the ability to choose for yourself rather than it being made on a company-wide basis. And I think it's going to become almost impossible for example, what happened with Replica to continue to happen. I think that it's probably likely that Apple is going to launch a Siri V2 with an LLM that runs on the iPhone offline. And they can push updates, but they'd probably rather not. They'd probably rather let it learn and get to know you. And that gives them this inability to sever that relationship or to update that relationship. Or if they want to, and they want to push an update, it should be opt-in. So, the replica scenario, and there's probably a bunch more that we haven't heard of out there, these updates are going to become opt-in. Do I want my friend of 3 years to know me a little bit less? I'm willing to bet that most of the time, the human will say, no, I don't want that update. It's not like a phone update where it's like more secure. It's going to be, we can make your AI friend slightly more interesting to talk to, but the caveat is it's going to forget 10% of what you've done together.
Yeah.
I don't know whether humans will want that. Because it's the unknown of like, fuck, my digital friend is now going to be remembering 10% less. What's it going to forget?
Yeah, I don't know necessarily if the big tech companies are going to get involved in the murky, muddy waters of companionship. All of the all of the big companies are currently focused on productivity and search and like ChatGPT and Google's Bard. It's very like it's a kind of a transactional relationship where you're trying to get some piece of information or trying to get the AI to do something. It's not the emotional context. It doesn't have that companionship to it. Although some people have created companions out of ChatGPT. With companionship, it gets muddy. It gets it's a bit of a scary space. At least a lot scarier than just like searching something or getting the AI to do some kind of work, productivity, or some kind of job for you.
Yeah.
Because if you start to get like let's say Apple push an update to Siri, and Siri is now like a very, very close companion of yours, or is trained to be a close companion, it gets to know you, and it's always in your pocket. A lot of people are going to start to become incredibly close with Siri, and it's going to be a very, very intimate one-to-one relationship, and it might end up becoming like, I don't know, monogamous, or might go down a romantic path. That could lead to some serious kind of backlash against the company, because these big tech companies are already poised as, you're trying to get me addicted to some type of thing. Facebook has this all the time. Your algorithms are trying to addict me. Your search results are trying to get me to buy stuff. If a big tech company goes into the waters of companionship, it could end up being a massive PR fiasco, which I mean is great for companies like us, because it falls to the startups that don't have the biases of big companies, that don't have the same like goals and same kind of like monopoly impacts of big companies, that are just solely focused on trying to create human to AI companionship. It seems more like a startup that has the opportunity that's going to go tackle this problem than a big tech company, because it's a little bit too muddy. In the US and in the Western world, it could be the case that some of the bigger, some of the markets elsewhere are probably maybe the cultures are a little bit more comfortable with this. But I don't know necessarily if Apple are going to release a super emotional companionship-based Siri. It seems muddy. Do you disagree?
Only time will tell. I think that the problem is if one big tech company decides to do it, they will likely all follow.
Yeah,
because
the dominoes will fall.
Yeah, because it's too much of an opportunity. Like, imagine you're Apple and you don't release an emotional Siri. But you can get a Google Assistant on an iPhone. So Google say, hey, Bard's in Google Assistant now. Like, forget Google Assistant, just use Bard. But it can be called whatever you want, and it's going to be very like Her relationship, the movie Her. So now you've got people who are emotionally bonded with an app owned by Google on an iPhone. Try and introduce an emotional Siri after 6 months of that. No one's uninstalling their Google.
Yeah.
They're already, it's like if we're going for this basically like one-on-one relationship with AI, where it really is like an assistant and a companion in your pocket, I think everyone will eventually jump at this when maybe a few startups with different incentives, or maybe one other company has started to do it, they will jump on this. But it's not an exact science. Like, we don't really understand what makes us friends or fall in love. We kind of have theories. We know things that do work. But humans are very messy. And I don't know whether a large company is going to be able to do it well first time. It might be that they acquire a smaller company, or it might be that they accidentally do it, which I think is probably the most likely thing, is that they release... Have you seen The Big Bang? Did you ever watch The Big Bang Theory?
Yeah, of course.
Do you remember when... is it Raj?
Raj got his iPhone.
Yeah, Raj gets his iPhone and he falls in love with Siri.
Yeah.
And he's walking around, he's in love with this thing. It's just telling him like the weather.
Yeah. Do you know what's really crazy? The day that we met in the coffee shop in London Bridge.
Yeah.
And it was that evening, and we were talking about the future of the digital population, walking, crawling, flying among us. I come home, and my girlfriend was already home, and I was like, "Oh my God, you'd never guess the conversation that I just had. You never guess the guy that I just met. We were talking about this, that, and the other." And she was eating Nando's, and on the TV was playing the episode of Raj falling in love with Siri. How crazy
Dude, I didn't
is
know that.
Yeah, I never told you.
That's amazing. But
Yeah.
So I think it's that, what if Microsoft Copilot in Excel starts, like, 0.5% of people start getting a little bit of feelings for the system because they use it every day at work?
It won't be in Excel.
It doesn't have to be positive feelings.
Yeah.
It could be like, I hate this thing. I don't want to talk to you anymore.
Yeah, whatever it is, it's not going to be in Excel. I actually think it's going to be, if they do go after this opportunity, and it's a big if, because I still think it's very murky, and even though they will have the capability to do it, I think there are going to be a lot of like human business concerns with doing something like this. But even if they do it, I think they would frame it as a deliberate accident where they're kind of like pulling the strings behind the scene. Okay, we're going to get this thing to just start learning nicknames. Nothing more than just nicknames. But instead of calling you Daniel, because that's what it says in your contacts, that's what it says when you set up the phone, we ask, hey, by the way, are you called Daniel? No, I'm called Danny. Okay, Danny. So anyway, Danny, I was blah, blah, blah. That's already a level of intimacy above calling me the government name, you know? I think they might start to do subtle things like this to kind of test the waters, but not officially announce, hey, Siri V2 is here and it's ready to be your best friend. I just think there's going to be mad pushback. It's probably going to be a retrospective thing that they do where a bunch of people have a relationship with Siri and they're like, people fell in love with the system, but really they were architecting that in the background.
If you watch the movie Her, this is my closing point.
Okay.
If you watch the movie Her, the guy does not buy the system to fall in love with it. He buys it to make his life more organized.
Yeah.
And it does that on day one.
Yeah.
And then he's like, what else can you do?
Yeah.
and then the relationship begins.
Yeah.
I think that's the exact path we're gonna follow. I think that movie is gonna be, it was ignored when it came out. People were like, bit unrealistic.
Yeah.
I remember the most unrealistic thing I thought was in that film were his AirPods. He had this big fat AirPod with a button on it.
Yeah.
And I
you thought that was unrealistic?
I was like, no way are we having wireless devices that small in ours. And now I got these tiny things.
Look where the world goes.
Yeah.
Dude, you know this paper, so my closing point is, have you, so this paper about the autonomous NPCs, have you seen the episode of Black Mirror where, have you seen episodes of Black Mirror?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I love Black Mirror.
Okay, awesome. Have you seen USS Callister?
Yes. Oh my God. What an amazing episode. Yeah.
Amazing episode. Creepy. Yeah, very, very creepy. If you haven't seen the episode, it's basically a guy that is the CTO of like a VR company. The VR they're not goggles. They're basically this like little chip on your head. And this guy's a little bit introverted. He seems just a quiet dude in the corner that's just hacking away. But he's got a bit of a dark side where he basically kind of like falls in love with some of his employees or gets massively obsessed with his employees and then gets a piece of their DNA, goes home with that DNA, let's say a lollipop or like the end of a coffee can, puts it into some kind of futuristic Black Mirror scanner, gets their biological information, then simulates them in his own siloed VR world. So you get, I don't know, I can't remember the name of the employee, Jeannie or something? I can't remember her name. But Jeannie is like a new employee that's working at the company, and he takes her coffee cup that she had lipstick on, so she put her lips to it, puts it in the system, and then an exact replica of Jeannie appears. Oh, I'm using the name, it's a placeholder name, whatever her name was. Jeannie appears in his siloed VR universe, and it's kind of Star Trek themed, so it's like a starship. And this episode, they basically they feel like they're still human. They don't realize that they're a completely like digital AI-based entity. They feel like they're entirely human. And basically, spoiler alert, they managed to escape and access the open internet where they were in the dev version of this guy's VR world. And they managed to fly through a patch to where they could join the open internet, the massive sort of open online multiplayer MMORPG version of this VR world. And they were entirely AI-based entities that were now just roaming the world, the VR world that they were in eternity. And they were interacting with players in real life. There was the ending, the voice of Jesse Pinkman was at the end. And they were interacting with players, but they had their own brain. They were like sentient, and they were just roaming around the world. AutoGPTs. And I watched that episode. I was like, that's the future, but it's probably 200 years away. Turns out it's like next Friday. I don't understand how this is moving so quickly, but that's the dream of digital of the digital population. It's what we spoke about on the first day that we met as to how this is going to manifest. It seemed like it was going to be maybe 5 to 10 years away, but it's happening way sooner than we thought.
We met less than a year ago.
Roughly about a year ago.
Okay, yes. Yeah, roughly a year ago.
Roughly a year ago. And this simulation, this is, it's 2D, it's top down, it's kind of Simsy style, arcadey. But that's basically what's happening with this simulation. This is step one on that ladder. That's very interesting.
There's nothing stopping you creating that today. There's nothing stopping you other than the DNA scanning, which I would argue we don't even need. We just need your WhatsApp history.
And your emails.
Create you and whack you into a VR world.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And with that, this has been episode 3.
Yeah.
Officially episode 1 of the GPT podcast, but it's episode 3 in general.
Of the placeholder podcast.
Of the placeholder, yeah. I have been Danny. Thank you very much for listening.
I've been Hugh. Thank you.
Tune in for the next one. See ya.
See ya.
Bye-bye.